I believe it was a brilliant piece of propaganda.
Emma, do you think we'll ever be able to travel to the moon the way we travel across the country on trains?
Definitely. Although not for another 84 years, not on trains. We'll have space vehicles, capsules settle off, rockets, devices that create giant explosions so powerful that they
break the pull of the Earth's gravity and send the projectile through outer space. Emmett, I read that book too. You're quoting Jules Verne from The Earth to the Moon.
You've read Jules Verne.
I adore
plan that NASA has is to build a rocket called SLS, which is a heavy lift rocket. It's something that is much bigger than what we have today, and it will be able to launch the Orion capsule with humans on board, as well as landers or other components to destinations beyond Earth orbit. Right now, we only can fly in Earth orbit. That's the farthest that we can go, and this new system that we're building is going to allow us to go beyond and hopefully take humans into the solar system to explore. So the moon, Mars, asteroids, there's a lot of destinations that we could go to, and we're building these building block components in order to allow us to do that eventually.
The human soul yearns for discovery. By unlocking the mysteries of the universe, we unlock truths within ourselves. That's true. Our journey into space will not only make us stronger and more prosperous, but will unite us behind grand ambitions and bring us all closer together. Wouldn't that be nice? Can you believe that space is going to do that? I thought politics would do that. Well, we'll have to rely on space and stuff. Can you believe that space is going to do that? I thought politics would do that. Well, we'll have to rely on space and stuff.
Which came first? The science or the fiction? We're all familiar with the phrase, life imitates art. But it's quite astounding to learn just how spectacularly this seems to have borne itself out when it comes to the way that science fiction has managed to predict so many aspects of space travel, which supposedly eventually came to pass. I was quite amazed when I first heard that science fiction author Arthur C. Clarke actually wrote about the concept of geostationary satellites before they were ever built or tested by actual rocket scientists. But I was even more amazed to later learn that this is only partially true. Clarke was the first to write about the idea of using satellites for the purpose of telecommunications. The Brick Moon, a short story by Edward Everett Hale, was actually the first description of an artificial satellite, and it was published in the Atlantic Monthly starting in 1869. The book Edison's Conquest of Mars by Garrett P. Serviss describes spacesuits and airlocks in 1898. Most of us are quite familiar with the uncanny predictions of science fiction writers such as Jules Verne and H.G. Wells, and how these renowned writers and their fantastic imaginations supposedly inspired the legitimate scientific development of space exploration in the future. However, when we take a closer look at many of the specific plot points of Jules Verne's novel From the Earth to the Moon, the predictions almost begin to smack of plagiarism on the part of NASA. Verne wrote a story about the first manned spaceship in history, launched during the month of December by the United States from a base in Florida. The ship was made up mostly of aluminum, weighed 19,250 pounds, and cost what would now be about $12.1 billion to build. After 3 of the astronauts completed their moonwalk, they returned to Earth. Their capsule splashed down into the Pacific Ocean and was recovered by a U.S. Navy vessel. He published this in 1865, and being more than 100 years before the Apollo 11 mission, Verne's novel From the Earth to the Moon actually serves as a bizarrely accurate novelization of that mission. He was slightly off on the cost and weight of the rocket. The real stats were about 26,000 pounds and 14.4 billion, and the biggest difference between Verne and NASA was that Verne's astronauts were shot out of a huge cannon. But get this, Verne's space cannon was called Columbiad, and the Apollo 11 command module was named Columbia. But moving into the 20th century, science fiction authors such as Arthur C. Clarke, Isaac Asimov, Robert Heinlein, and Carl Sagan began to readily accept their titles as prophets of the future, and embraced the role of basically serving as spokesmen for all the magnificent technological marvels that had already unfolded and would yet to unfold. Gene Roddenberry and his Star Trek franchise is of course also credited greatly with inspiring an entire generation to grow up and turn their dreams of space travel into reality by joining NASA.
So, where to begin? Well, Star Trek was about nothing, really, if it wasn't about space. But in the 1960s, space travel was a lot less glamorous than it seemed on our show. In fact, it was a messy and dangerous business. The Soviet, Yuri Gagarin, became the first man in space in 1961.
This nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
Now, the space race was officially on. The newly formed NASA responded by sending the first Americans into space during the Mercury missions. NASA needed all the help it could get. And then, from the heavens, or at least the studios of NBC, came the inspiration they needed. On September 8, 1966, the USS Enterprise cruised effortlessly across the television screens of America for the first time. Audiences were astonished and inspired. And not just by my acting, but by a vision of space travel as it could one day be. Soon Star Trek would become NASA's inspiration, guiding the development of space travel to this very day.
Well, I've been interested in space and science literally for as long as I can remember. I have a vague recollection of walking into the living room when I was maybe 5 or so, and my father was watching TV, and I said, "What are you watching?" And he said, "They're going to send a man into space." And that must have been one of the early Mercury flights. And I was thrilled with that then, and I've stayed fascinated with the exploration of space my whole life.
But it wasn't just TV images of man's first faltering steps into space that captured young Mark's imagination. Changing channels, he saw a life-altering vision of space travel's future, a future he could be part of.
Captain, sensors report we're being scanned.
As soon as I began watching Star Trek, I was captivated by it.
By the alien ship?
No, sir, it's from that solar system ahead.
In Star Trek, regular people could go throughout the galaxy, whereas the reality at the time was a few very special men got to make very short trips just 100 or so miles away from Earth. And so Star Trek really offered a vision of what could be, and that was very exciting. And again, it was a vision that people wanted to believe was real.
It would appear someone is curious about us.
Dawn will be the latest probe to use ion propulsion, a revolutionary new system that uses electrically charged atomic particles as fuel, propelling crafts 10 times faster than if they used regular old-fashioned rocket fuel. Sounds pretty cool. Guess where they got the idea from?
I worked on a mission called Deep Space One, which was the first interplanetary mission to use ion propulsion to travel around the solar system. And the first time I ever heard of ion propulsion was in the Star Trek episode Spock's Brain. Aliens come to the Enterprise, and before they do their dastardly deed, Kirk walks over to Spock and says,
What do you read, Mr. Spock? Configuration unidentified, ion propulsion, high velocity, though of a unique technology.
And Scotty says,
I've never seen anything like it. And ion propulsion at that. Oh, they could teach us a thing or two.
And so the opportunity to connect what I saw in Star Trek as a little kid to what I'm doing now as an adult is very, very...
truly amazing, isn't it? Everything from space capsules to spacesuits, geostationary satellites to multi-stage rockets, zero gravity to space shuttles, lunar landers, and even ion propulsion systems, all predicted with stunning accuracy by the creative minds of science fiction writers.
When I first saw the movie 2001, I was amazed, awed, to say the least. The entire scope of the movie was overpowering, and for most of the people of the world was completely baffling. Most people who saw that movie did not understand from beginning to end what it was that they had experienced, but they knew, everyone who saw it, knew that they had experienced something profound. That something had been communicated to the dark, deep recesses of their mind, which they did not understand. And indeed, which they were incapable of understanding. For you see, the movie was not meant for the profane, as most of us are called, by the adepts or the initiates or the priests of the mystery schools. For that movie was a message to those initiates who were well versed in the symbology and the mystery religion of an ancient religion that is practiced to this day in secret.
Bill Cooper's now famous explanation of the occult symbolism embedded within Kubrick's celebrated cinematic masterpiece, 2001: A Space Odyssey, is an absolutely fascinating revelation. The manner by which he reveals how this pivotal film essentially outlines the entirety of the Luciferian belief system is nothing short of astounding. Now, if you are familiar with this exposition, indeed with this broader concept of how the esoteric symbolism used by the so-called illumined ones can be encoded within a narrative that is shown to the unsuspecting masses, I would like for you to consider something. Consider this same underlying concept, only expanded exponentially, beyond a singular film, beyond all Hollywood films and television put together, beyond the scope of even the 20th and 21st centuries. Consider this idea of Babylonian mysticism being written into the fabric of a technologically themed mythology as something which permeates virtually every facet of modern society. For indeed, mythology has long been a preferred vehicle of transmitting and cloaking such ancient Gnostic teachings, the stories and characters involved serving as archetypes for deeper esoteric themes and shadowy spiritual personalities. The fallen angels who rebelled with Lucifer and fell to earth have had their exploits and praises told and retold through countless ancient legends and mystical traditions, being regarded by the majority as nothing more than fictional myths and fairy tales, but regarded by the initiated as ancient truths and keys to the eventual fulfillment of that ancient Luciferian promise, "Ye shall be as gods." And truly this quest for the evolution into godhood has never died out. It has in fact only increased in fervor and resolve, being led through the centuries by these invisible entities who claim to lead the way to ascension, to enlightenment. We live in a world where the vast majority of people sincerely believe evolution to be a scientifically established fact, completely oblivious to the fact that this idea of the universe springing forth from an infinitely compacted singularity is one that traces back into the bowels of Greek Gnosticism, Eastern mysticism, and Kabbalistic occultism. It is a central component of Luciferian cosmology, repackaged into simplified atheistic form, fit for consumption by the unsuspecting masses. And so by the millions, blinded by the pseudoscientific veneer, humanity continues to look to the stars for answers, to gaze at the planets in lustful dreams of transcendent experience and boundless exploration. The guise of astronomy, thinly veiling the enduring ancient practices of astrology. For what does astrology teach about these planets, these spheres? These planets, these planes, these wandering stars were regarded since ancient times by virtually every mystical tradition as embodying different realms, spheres of influence, or categories of dominion both within the life of the individual and the group as a whole. The Bible refers to certain angelic beings in terms of powers and principalities, and indeed, this is exactly how I believe this can and should be understood. These various descriptions of planets or worlds being equated with areas of dominion on various spiritual planes, which are at the same time being equated with various pantheons of gods, and simultaneously also being equated with various chakras or power centers within the human body. The Kabbalistic Tree of Life claims to represent this same array of power centers or spheres, and occult teachers such as the renowned Manly P. Hall openly connect the spheres of the Tree of Life to the planets and astrology as well. These are just different ways of trying to embody the same thing. This hierarchy of realms, if you will, all connected and all said to be in need of being held in proper balance. We see this again being represented in a slightly different way in the Kabbalistic depiction of the Ein Sof, the 10 emanations of God, where hereby the term God is used in a rather pantheistic sense. And so each emanation corresponds to a different dimension of reality, all connected, and all again said to be in balance with one another. Now, quickly turn and contemplate this in comparison to the early conceptions of the solar system as imagined by men like Copernicus and Kepler. Prior to Newton's mathematical derivations, or divinations, of elliptical orbits, the planets were regarded as existing in a number of concentric rings. The eventual number of heavenly bodies being named by science, if we include the Sun, ironically mirrors the number of emanations described by the Kabbalah. And so again, I return back to this question which so many people like to ask, in regards to the reason as to why the powers that shouldn't be would go to so much effort and expense to fake not just moon landings, but an entire cosmological framework which starts at the Big Bang and then pushes forward all the way to the apotheosis of man. Do you still not see it? Do we not see the fingerprints of the same Freemasonic occultism plastered all over NASA since the beginning? The same Gnostic mythology being alluded to again and again and again in the naming of not just the spacecraft and space missions, but in the naming of almost every alleged new discovery in the cosmos. Do we not realize that the reason for all of this ritualistic dissemination of symbolism is not merely to gain our subconscious approval or to drain our spiritual energy and so forth? No, I would say it with extreme conviction at this point that the primary drive for embedding these ancient mystical concepts into a false narrative of scientific materialism is what Alice Bailey spoke about in the externalization of the hierarchy. It's the agenda of bringing this ancient Babylonian mystery school religion out of the shadows and into the mainstream. When Bill Cooper made his analysis of Kubrick's film, he spoke about it representing the ancient mystery religion practiced in secret, not meant for the profane. But I believe that now more than ever, we can see that the drive behind this massive scale cinematic event we call science is to in fact beckon us, the ignorant masses, the quote profane, towards despising our own excluded position and kindling a burning desire to obtain the same secret knowledge ourselves. In short, this vast collection of modern mythology is all about bringing Luciferianism to the masses.
The human soul yearns for discovery by unlocking the mysteries of the universe. we unlock truths within ourselves. That's true. Our journey into space will not only make us stronger and more prosperous, but will unite us behind grand ambitions and bring us all closer together. Wouldn't that be nice? Can you believe that space is going to do that? I thought politics would do that. Well, we'll have to rely on space instead. Can you believe that space is going to do that? I thought politics would do that. Well, we'll have to rely on space instead.
Once you start up on the PTC at any time, you can start off at divert 49. Over. Well, Joe, we're just finishing up the probe and about to close up the hatch here. We're going to be a couple minutes late, probably get started on the PTC. But no sweat, 11. We're standing by. Over. This is Apollo Control. That was Neil Armstrong reporting that they are now reinstalling the probe and drogue, which is just about on the flight plan schedule. And they reported that they would be putting the spacecraft in a slow roll shortly to maintain passive thermal control. In that mode, the spacecraft rotates at a rate of about 3 revolutions per hour to maintain even heating. We have a precise time on that sphere of influence change, the point at which the moon, for calculation purposes here in mission control, comes under the predominant influence, spacecraft comes under the predominant influence of the moon's gravitational field. And we now calculate that event will occur at 61 hours, 39 minutes, 55 seconds around the last time. Apollo 11, Houston, Mike, there's no wait required. We're rate to steady. You can proceed on, over. I'm doing it, John. Right. The tunnel is all good. Drug, probe, and hands all back in. Right, copy out. Hello, Apollo 11. Houston, we have some new additions to your alternate and contingency checklist. If you would break that out, over. Okay, Houston, left, ready to copy. Roger, 11. If you'll turn to page F, flag 2-22, over. Okay, I have F flag 2-22. Roger, Neil. Under column L, that's column Lima, line 06. The new data is 00001. Line 07. The new data is 02134. Over. Okay, I have in F, flag 2-22, column Lima, item 6, 00001, item 7, 02134. Roger, that's correct. Thank you much, Al. 11 Houston, for your information, those two entries are an update to your Delta 8 that we have already uplinked into the CMC, over. All right, thank you. What was our margin on, Charlie? About an 18-kilometer line, or what? Our update put you to the Delta H to 35 kilometers, Mike, over. Okay. Apollo 11, Houston, we got some switch positions for you for the high gain, over. Okay, go ahead. Roger, bud. Select Bravo, Omni, high gain track to manual. Beam wide, over. Okay, Bravo, Omni, track manual, and beam wide. Roger, and your high gain angles are -50 on the pitch, 270 on the yaw, over. Okay, going there now. Hello, Apollo 11, Houston. We have some updates and some things we'd like to talk to you about if you're in the middle of your meal. If it's convenient any time for you, we're ready with some updates, over. What are the updates going to apply to? Roger, we have a couple of changes on the LIM mission rules, no-go for your no-go card, Neil. One flight change on the aft dip, fuel, and temp pressure card. And we have a change to the procedure for the secondary radiator leak check, which is to be performed at 71 hours tomorrow. And also some indications that we have a couple of landing site obliques stowed in the wrong place, over. Okay, any of those in the flight plan, secondary radiator that's affirmative. The secondary radiator leak check is called out in the flight plan at 7120. That procedure is listed in your launch operations book. We on page 2-9, L2-9. We'd like to change that procedure, over. Okay, we stand by. Sorry, on the secondary leak check, just read it verbatim like you want, and I'll copy it directly into the flight plan and not fool around with the checklist. Roger, that's fine.
Science fiction is what I'm talking about. Science and science fiction are essentially the same.
How do you prove a black hole?
Astronauts are really, really good at making pictures in space that look like you've never left the planet. In fact, it's almost hard-pressed to tell whether you're in space or not in this picture. You know, we've got some fancy backdrops, I guess.
I can go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again.
You don't believe we went to the moon?
I believe it was a brilliant piece of propaganda.
Emmett, do you think we'll ever be able to travel to the moon the way we travel across the country on trains?
Definitely, although not.
The human soul yearns for discovery. By unlocking the mysteries of the universe, we unlock truths within ourselves. That's true. Our journey into space will not only make us stronger and more prosperous, but will unite us behind grand ambitions and bring us all closer together. Wouldn't that be nice? Can you believe that space is going to do that? I thought politics would do that. Well, we'll have to rely on space and stuff. Can you believe that space is going to do that? I thought politics would do that. Well, we'll have to rely on space and stuff.
Plan that NASA has is to build a rocket called SLS, which is a heavy lift rocket. It's something that is much bigger than what we have today, and it will be able to launch the Orion capsule with humans on board, as well as landers or other components to destinations beyond Earth orbit. Right now, we only can fly in Earth orbit. That's the farthest that we can go, and this new system that we're building is going to allow us to go beyond and hopefully take humans into the solar system to explore. So the moon, Mars, asteroids, there's a lot of destinations that we could go to, and we're building these building block components in order to allow us to do that eventually.
Space vehicles, capsules settle off, rockets, devices that create giant explosions so powerful that they
break the pull of the Earth's gravity and send the projectile through outer space. Damn it! I read that book too.
which came first? The science or the fiction? We're all familiar with the phrase, life imitates art. But it's quite astounding to learn just how spectacularly this seems to have borne itself out when it comes to the way that science fiction has managed to predict so many aspects of space travel, which supposedly eventually came to pass. I was quite amazed when I first heard that science fiction author Arthur C. Clarke actually wrote about the concept of geostationary satellites before they were ever built or tested by actual rocket scientists.